Hi, my name is Dr. John Douillard, and today I want to talk to you about breathing techniques that a lot of researchers are now recommending for COVID to be used before, during, and after a COVID event, particularly to support respiratory health. These techniques are called respiratory muscle training techniques, sometimes called inspiratory muscle training techniques, techniques that strengthen the muscles of respiration. It does make logical sense, right? That if your respiratory muscles are weak and you're not breathing as efficiently as you should or could, then you would be, at higher risk if you did get some type of respiratory issue, COVID or respiratory event, right? So now the studies are actually showing that these techniques are in fact being recommended to hospitals and to medical doctors in support of a healthy recovery from something like COVID. Studies have shown that respiratory training techniques actually shorten hospital stays. They help to quicken the recovery of patients with respiratory issues and respiratory conditions. So the science is there. I've written a very comprehensive article about these techniques, respiratory training techniques, and how important they are. But in Ayurvedic medicine, there are hundreds of Ayurvedic breathing techniques with different effects, very profound and also at the same time very subtle. And I've written many articles about the different pranayama breathing techniques and all the science to back them up. And I encourage you to actually look at those articles. And I'm going to talk to you today about three specific breathing techniques, one called Bastrika, one called Kapalabhati, and the other one called pranayama. Three Ayurvedic breathing techniques that powerfully mimic the effects of inspiratory muscle training or respiratory muscle therapy that's used in hospitals and has been researched so thoroughly. So please, again, check out the article where I cite all the science behind these techniques. It's very, very important. A lot of these techniques require devices that you have to get, but in Ayurveda, you do it with your fingers or just with your breath. And I'm going to teach you this kind of three-step pranayama breathing technique today. And the first one of those breathing techniques is called Bastrika, Bellows breath. And I've been teaching Bastrika as part of my 1-minute meditation for decades. And it's just a simple deep bellows breath in and deep bellows breath out. What's neat about this exercise is it's both an inspiratory and expiratory breathing technique. So it strengthens the muscles of inhaling and also the muscles of exhaling. And that's important because we do both, right? The most important muscle that we have for breathing is no doubt your diaphragm. Diaphragm is a major muscle that when it contracts fully, it brings air all the way down into the lower lobes of your lungs where all the oxygen exchange or most of the oxygen exchange takes place. And if you're not breathing deeply into the lower lobes of your lungs and the diaphragm is not contracting fully, and it's very common, something called diaphragmatic fatigue. They had one study with elite athletes and half of the elite athletes had early or premature diaphragmatic fatigue. So if their diaphragms are contracting, the elite athletes, then chances are yours and mine are not contracting fully as well, which is why these inspiratory muscle training techniques, strengthening the muscles of inspiration, your diaphragm, and these respiratory muscle techniques that sometimes do both inspiration and expiration are so critically important. So I'm going to teach you a three-step technique, one using Bastrika, then using Kapalabhati, which is what they call it the skull cleansing technique, and I'll tell you a bit about that in just a minute, followed by pranayama, which is the one that is specifically designed to strengthen the diaphragm. So Bastrika has been shown in studies after study to actually outperform running as a respiratory therapy. In other words, the aerobic benefits from Bastrika outperform running. So it's very specific for breathing. That's why I call it the bellows breath, where you're bellowing in and bellowing out your air, and that's really important. The Kapalabhati breathing also has really great science to support healthy oxygen saturation, which is what you want, because when you don't use your diaphragm fully, you're going to breathe really shallow. And the rib cage is going to become tight like a cage. And you have what's called elastic recoil, where the rib cage becomes tighter and tighter and tighter. And then your diaphragm has to pull that air through and expand that rigid rib cage. And over time, the less we breathe, the more we sit around and slouch, the more tight the rib cage becomes, the more difficult it is for the diaphragm to contract, And of course, the more shallow we breathe. And the more shallow we breathe, the more we overbreathe oxygen, too much oxygen in. 75% of the oxygen we take in, we breathe right back out, never used. So that's a problem, right? And when we breathe out that excess oxygen, we're also breathing out our excess carbon dioxide, CO2. And carbon dioxide is really important in relationship to the balance between oxygen and carbon dioxide. And most of us are overbreathing oxygen and we're breathing off too much CO2. So our oxygen levels have gone up and our CO2 levels have gone down. And that's important because the CO2 levels, when they go up, that's what triggers the oxygen to be released from your blood and blast into your tissues like your lungs and your diaphragm to support healthy diaphragmatic breathing function or function anywhere in your body. So if you're not good at sort of, holding your breath, or you're breathing really shallow, it's a really good chance your CO2 levels have actually gone down and you're at risk for not having efficiently or having the efficiency of dumping that oxygen into your tissues where they belong, where they can function optimally. It's really important. So that's why breathing is so critical. It's one of the major reasons and why diaphragm inspiratory muscle training, strengthening your diaphragm, is so important and so well documented for these respiratory concerns. So it's really important. The Kapalabhati is a unique exercise where you actually do sort of instead of a bellows breath where it's equal in and equal out, you're actually going to be doing an exhalation with your abdominal muscles, where you sort of kind of use your stomach to force the air out. And so the inhalation is passive and the exhalation is active. And what that means is that even though your diaphragm is contracting on the inhalation, this technique, because you do that abdominal contraction to force the air into the respiratory cavity, to the thoracic cavity, and then into the skull, and they call it the skull cleansing technique, you're actually creating, with that abdominal contraction, an abdominal diaphragmatic cardiac massage. And that's been shown in actually our studies, when we did our nasal breathing studies in my book, Body, Mind, Sport, to increase the vagal response and flip the brain into an alpha state and create a neurological calm. But it also massages the diaphragm. That abdominal contraction onto the diaphragm activates not only the diaphragm and contracts and helps it to fully relax and then can fully contract, but it also helps strengthen the vagus nerve, which supports heart and cardiovascular health as well. So really cool exercise, and that's going to be step 2, is we're going to do 10 breaths of the Kapalabhati. So we're going to do 10 breaths of Bastrika, 10 breaths of Kapalabhati, and then we're going to do 10 breaths of my absolute favorite, which you've probably heard me talk about before, called Pratiloma. And Pratiloma is the actual Ayurvedic breathing technique specifically designed to strengthen your diaphragm. And it's done so by partially closing your nostrils and breathing in through resistance. And when they did the studies on inspiratory muscle training, they used a range of inhalation restriction by 30 to 50%. And that's what showed shortened stays in hospitals, shortened use of ventilators, quick, faster recoveries. The list of the benefits was quite amazing just by restricting the airflow on the inhalation. And what that does is it makes your diaphragm contract, right? If you plug your nose and breathe in, your diaphragm is going to work hard, right? But if you partially close it 50% or a little bit more, 80% max, you're going to force that diaphragm to really contract, and then you let it go. Breathe in all the way and then let it go. So it's very, very simple, and that's been shown to really mimic the inspiratory muscle training benefits, which is just really quite phenomenal. So this is a 3-part breathing technique. We're going to do 10 of each of those. We're going to do it together, and then I want you to also know that there's, in the article associated with this video, there are links to whole articles and whole videos about how to actually do these breathing techniques. So if you're not sure how to do these techniques and you don't really get clear information or understanding from this video in my demonstration of how to do this 3-step technique, go back to the article, click on each of the breathing techniques, and then you'll go from there. Okay, so a lot of times taking a tissue for this particular technique, is good because Bastrika is the Bellows. So we're going to do 10 Bellows, 10 Kapalabates, and 10 Pratilomas. And that's it. And you do that 3 to 5 rounds of that twice a day to help kind of slowly strengthen and rebuild your respiratory, muscular strength, health, and integrity, right? Studies have shown that these techniques actually will thicken and strengthen the diaphragm. It's powerful. And how the diaphragm could actually not be as thick is the only way that can happen is because it's weakened. And that's not good. Major muscle in the body has got to be strong. And here's how it works. So we're going to do a technique, the Bastrika. We do 10 of these together. Okay, here it is. Just sit up straight in a chair. Back straight is ideal. Be comfortable. Whenever you do any breathing technique, it's really good to check with your doctor and make sure that they say it's safe for you. Definitely if you have any medical condition. Pranayama breathing techniques are always comfortable. There's no strain in pranayama breathing techniques. So we're going to make sure that you're always comfortable. Any dizziness or any discomfort, stop immediately. And don't continue these breathing techniques until you get a checkup by your doctor and make sure that you're okay to do these breathing techniques. Okay, so here we go. So Bastrika, 10 Bastrika, 10 Kapalabhati, and 10 of the Pratiloma. The Bastrika is, that's that. The Kapalabhati is using your abdominal muscles, and you can put your hand on your belly and it's breathing in through the nostrils. And that's that. And the Pratiloma, you can use your fingers, partially closed, and breathe in all the way until you feel your diaphragm contract. You'll feel it under your rib cage, and that's how you know you're doing Pratiloma. And then let it out through the nose. And again, fully and maximally all the way in. Feel the diaphragm contract and let it out. And we're going to do 10 of those. Okay, we'll do it all together. So here we go. Stay with me. Bastrika first. Ten of those. 10 Kapalabhati. And then 10 Pratiloma. And that's 10. That's one round. And if you do one round, you can just close your eyes and just meditate for a few minutes, and that's enough. If you feel okay and it's comfortable, then you can do another round of those 3. You can do 3 to 5 rounds twice a day. That's how it works, and that's a comprehensive approach to using the pranayama breathing techniques to mimic the inspiratory muscle training techniques and the respiratory muscle therapies that typically use some type of device. So you can do this at home. Always remember, check with your doctor if you have any issues and definitely any discomfort. Before you start any breathing technique, make sure you're A-OK by your medical doctor. All right, thanks for listening. I'm Dr. John Douillard. Do you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe and share.
This recording is brought to you by LifeSpa, where ancient Ayurvedic wisdom meets modern science. Get access to free health video newsletters by Dr. John at lifespa.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.